In this video, we're going to cover making this little scissor holder, just something made out of a little scrap of fabric that's easy to do, a little fun project for you. This is able to hold my fabric shears in the back. I've got a middle section there for my paper shears, and if I want to pen some pencils there on the front. So to start off with, we're going to make the pattern. This is a quarter circle with a radius of 32 centimeters to start. So once we have that, we're going to put it into 4 sections. So this is quite simple. We just fold it in half and in half again. And then we have our 4 sections. So once it's folded, I want us then to cut off this bottom section 5 centimeters. So measuring from the point up 5 centimeters, and we're just going to cut that off to give us some width of the bottom of our holder. So I'll show you what that should look like. So then we no longer have a point on the end where we've taken our 5 centimeters off. Then if we open it up on the sections, I've measured some different lengths on these lines to create our shape. So on the left-hand side, this outer edge, from this base point, I've measured up 21 centimeters. The next line, we're going to use the full length of our pattern piece, of our curve. The next line here is 25 centimeters to this point. And then 20, and the other outside edge of our quarter circle is 17. Now these measurements are just a guide. So then with our points that have been marked, we're going to join them together to create the shape of our pattern. So this is what we're left with then. And I've put on here that I need to cut 1 pair. It's for my scissors holder, and it includes a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And I'm using the longest straight edge as my grain line. So when we sew this together and the way it folds, this is the shape we have for the pockets for our scissors. So that's how we create our pattern. So I've cut out my pattern piece in some fabric, just some odd scraps. I had it folded in half so you can see I have a pair. And then in some wadding, I've cut out the shape as well, but just 1 piece in wadding. And this is only a couple of mil thick. We don't need it too chunky. We just need something that sort of protects the shears and stops the shears from going actually through the fabric. So I'm ready to start sewing this together. I have the right sides of my fabrics together, and underneath I have a piece of wadding. So I'm going to stitch around using a centimeter seam allowance. I am going to start on the longest straight edge. I'm going to come up a few centimeters from the corner, back tack to start, go around my piece, and as I turn the last corner again, I'll come down a few centimeters and back tack to finish. This will leave a section of this seam open where it won't be stitched, so we can turn it through to the right side. So we know the back line of the number 4 is our centimeter. I'm going to start, I'm going to back tack a few stitches, and we're going to go round. Now we know this is a scissors holder, this is not a garment, so there's a little bit of leeway here if we're not quite as accurate as we would like. This is meant to be a fun project for us to produce. So we're going to go around the shape, taking our centimeter seam allowance, keeping the raw edges of our fabric together. This is also then holding the wadding in place ready for when we turn it through to the right side. Just going to lift and turn there to keep our shape so we're not distorting. down to the corner, needle in as we lift the foot to turn. So this is the shorter of the straighter edges. Again, needle in as we turn, lift the foot. We're going to go around the bottom curve. Make sure we follow the curve shape. Again, needle in, turn. I'm just going to come up this row just a few centimeters as we mentioned, and then we're going to back tack to secure the end. Needle at the highest point to pull your work out of the machine, and we can trim our thread ends. So through this hole that we've got here, we can turn the whole thing through to the right side. So you just need to take a little bit of time turning it through so our seam is on the edge, all the way around. You can put your hand inside to push out on that seam. So once we've sewn them all together, we had our gap still here that we turned it through. I've pulled it through and poked through all our corners, and the seam is on the edge. Now this opening here, I'm just going to leave those raw edges tuck inside the centimetre seam allowance, and I am going to just top stitch them closed, because this will be on our first fold. It'll be stitched down afterwards and it will be hidden. So as I said here, we've got them tucked inside, and then I'm just going to top stitch, making sure I go through all the layers. Back stitch at the beginning and end to make sure it's secure. And we can close that opening, and then just trim thread ends to keep the work nice and clean. So once we've closed our opening, we're going to create our first fold. So I'm coming across, so from our point at the top here of our first fold, approximately 9 centimetres. Of course, you can vary the size of the pocket openings yourself. Now I'm going to stitch through all the layers, holding this pocket in place. So again, back tack at the beginning and end always to keep our seam secure. I'm going to come off the edge of the fold to make sure I catch it all, and back tack. Again, needle to the highest point to remove our work, and then we can trim our thread ends. So now we can do the other folds. So it is bringing the shorter edge now on top of that first fold we've created, and then bringing the short edge over to the fold on the other side. So you can see we have our pockets. Then we're going to stitch through all the layers on each of the outer edges to hold our folds in place and across the bottom, so the point of our shears don't come through the hole. So now we've stitched through all the layers on our first fold, we're going to do the second fold. So the short edge here, I'm going to fold over, nice and tight to our first edge. Then I'm going to flip the whole thing over so I can see the fold from underneath, and I'm going to stitch close to this edge through all the layers for our second fold. All the way down to the bottom and back tag. Again, keep our thread ends trimmed, keeping the work clean. And where we started our seam. So then I'm going to fold over the short edge now to the outer edge of our first fold and top stitch through there. So this is why we didn't want our wadding too thick, as now we're going through all the layers. Nice and slowly, making sure you've got all the layers and you're close to the edge. And then when we get to the bottom, we're going to back tack. Again, trim our thread ends. So at the moment now we still have a hole at the bottom. So I can see the piece at the back is a little bit shorter. So I'm going to use this as a guide to stitch across the bottom rather than the front in case I was to miss that back panel. And I'm going to stitch all the way across and then all the way back. And I'm going to come across again and back again. We want to make sure there's plenty of stitches there and that that's secure so the scissors can't poke through at the end. And we just trim our thread ends off, and then we have our little scissor holder. So there's our scissor holder, and we can put fabric shears in the top pocket, paper in the middle, and our pens or pencils, whatever we want, in that front one. You want a quick little project, fun to make, just out of scraps you might have lying around.